Hello, everyone. Welcome to our All African Peoples Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter film series. My name is Kendra, and I'm joined here with my comrades, Onyesu and Deidre. First, before we begin, I want to just give you all context of who we are and what we stand for. The All African Peoples Revolutionary Party is a permanent, independent, and revolutionary socialist pan-African political party based in Africa and the homeland of all African people all over the world, Africa. And the integral part of Pan-Africanism and world socialist revolutionary movement, a part of it is that we understand that all people of African descent, wherever you are, across the world, North America, South America, Caribbean, wherever, we as Africans belong to the African nation. And what we strive for is organizing for, again, a socialist Africa, Pan-African Africa, and we organize to fight capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism for the liberation of African people, of Africa, and all oppressed peoples across the world. And so we, just as a land acknowledgement, we are on Tiwa land, this land that we are on currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It is the Tiwa people's land. And so we want to acknowledge that this land was stolen by the United States, by these colonists, these settlers. And basically we're saying, we're going to get our land back in Africa. The Tiwa people are going to get their land back here. And all indigenous persons around the world who have been colonized, their land's going to be, they're going to get their land back. It's just going to hand it off to Onisomo to introduce us to what we're showing you all today.
See, thank you so much, Kendra. Also, I froze just as in the middle of you speaking, and then it came back at the perfect time. So thank you so much, technology. So thank you, Kendra, for that awesome introduction about who we are and what this is. This is the Pan-African Film Series, and we are really excited this month to be showing a film that really embodies what Kendra just laid out, that we are an African people, that our liberation and our future is in Africa, that the liberation of people of African descent all around the world depends on the liberation of Africa. And so the film we're showing today is about one such liberation struggle in one African nation, Guinea-Bissau. It's a film about Amilcar Cabral, who was the founder of the PAIGC. The PAIGC, of course, waged an armed struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau, and they won that armed struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau thanks to the ideological and political leadership of Amilcar Cabral and the level of organization of the masses of African people in Guinea-Bissau. So the film is called Cabralista, and it's a breakdown of who Amilcar Cabral was, what he believed, and how he was able to build a strategy or help contribute to building a strategy in Guinea-Bissau that successfully overturned colonialism. The history of the revolution in Guinea-Bissau is a history of African people winning against almost insurmountable odds. We're often told that the enemy we're up against is overpowered, it's too strong, we can't beat it, they have stronger weapons. But the revolution in Guinea-Bissau is an example of how when oppressed people have organization, when oppressed people have ideology, when oppressed people have a commitment to liberation, they can actually win against a stronger enemy. So as usual, we're going to show y'all the film. It's about 50 minutes long, and then after the movie's over, we're going to come back for a group discussion between myself, Kendra, and our comrade Deidre from the APRP New Mexico chapter, and also with y'all in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. So without further ado, we're going to start the film. If you have any issues hearing or seeing the program, please let us know in the comments wherever you're watching, whether that is Twitch, Periscope, Facebook, or YouTube, and we'll attempt to address the issues. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I do not even use the term African American. I use the term Africans because that's what we are. We're Africans in America. There's nothing American about us. Our history has only been a history of struggle in America. We are the only ethnic group in America who have to shed our blood to make reform. To get the vote, we must shed our blood. To get our children to school, we must shed our blood. To get on a bus and sit where we want, we must shed our blood. To even get in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store, we must shed our blood. So I don't see how we could be American. We're Africans in America struggling against American capitalism. And only until it's destroyed will we enjoy the rights that everyone else is speaking of.
Well, how do you respond to that? liberation of oppressed people in the United States had to do not with climbing up some ladder to success, not for asking to be just like Rockefeller or just like DuPont or just like Ford, because that would only continue the oppression and exploitation of oppressed people in the United States, and specifically African people born and raised in the United States. Socialism is an integral part of building social justice on this planet. The condition of my people, my history, was very much connected with other oppressed people, and I began to see that the same foot that was on the necks of the Vietnamese people, that was on the necks of all oppressed people on the planet, was the same foot that was on my neck. And so I began to understand that imperialism has to go. It is a poison that is killing people all over this world. The priorities of this planet have to be completely changed. And instead of profits, instead of policies that destroy the earth, that destroy the water, that destroy human beings, I believe a policy that protects people, that makes people live in a community, a world community. That's what I believe. That's my basic political commitment at this moment.
Camaradas, fala o camarada Amilcar Cabral, secretário-geral do partido.
Nous sommes des peuples africains de cette Afrique bafouée par l'impérialisme et le colonialisme pendant des décades et en quelques cas pendant des siècles. Nos pays sont des pays économiquement arriérés. Nos peuples se trouvent dans une étape historique caractérisée par cette condition arriérée de notre économie. Nous devons être conscients de cela. Nous sommes de cette partie de l'Afrique que les impérialistes ont appelée l'Afrique noire. Oui, nous sommes des Noirs, mais nous sommes des hommes comme tous les autres. Nous avons notre cœur, notre tête, notre histoire. Les colonialistes ont l'habitude de dire qu'eux nous ont fait rentrer dans l'histoire. Nous nous montrons aujourd'hui que non. Ils nous ont fait sortir de l'histoire, de notre propre histoire. Aujourd'hui, nous voulons, par nos propres pieds, par nos propres moyens, par nos propres efforts et sacrifices, retourner à notre histoire. Nous, peuples de l'Afrique, nous avons été capables de féconder nos efforts, nos sacrifices. Nous, peuple pacifique, mais fiers de notre amour à la liberté, de notre attachement à l'idée du progrès, nous avons pris les armes pour défendre nos droits. Nous sommes des peuples pacifiques. Nous n'aimons pas la guerre. Mais la guerre, la lutte armée de libération nationale a été le plébiscite.
Well, I do not even use the term African American. I use the term Africans because that's what we are. We're Africans in America. There's nothing American about us. Our history has only been a history of struggle in America. We are the only ethnic group in America who have to shed our blood to make reform. To get the vote, we must shed our blood. To get our children to school, we must shed our blood. To get on a bus and sit where we want, we must shed our blood. To even get in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store, we must shed our blood. So I don't see how we could be American. We're Africans in America struggling against American capitalism. And only
Camaradas, fala o camarada Amilcar Cabral, secretário-geral do partido.
Nous sommes des peuples africains de cette Afrique bafouée par l'impérialisme et le colonialisme pendant des décades et en quelques cas pendant des siècles. Nos pays sont des pays économiquement arriérés. Nos peuples se trouvent dans une étape historique caractérisée par cette condition arriérée de notre économie. Nous devons être conscients de cela. Nous sommes de cette partie de l'Afrique que les impérialistes ont appelée l'Afrique noire. Oui, nous sommes des Noirs, mais nous sommes des hommes comme tous les autres. Nous avons notre cœur, notre tête, notre histoire. Les colonistes ont l'habitude de dire qu'eux nous ont fait rentrer dans l'histoire. Nous montrons aujourd'hui que non. Ils nous ont fait sortir de l'histoire, de notre propre histoire. Aujourd'hui, nous voulons, par nos propres pieds, par nos propres moyens, par nos propres efforts et sacrifices, retourner à notre histoire. Nous, peuples de l'Afrique, nous avons été capables de féconder nos efforts, nos sacrifices. Nous, peuple pacifique, mais fiers de notre amour à la liberté, de notre attachement à l'idée du progrès, nous avons pris les armes pour défendre nos droits. Nous sommes des peuples pacifiques. Nous n'aimons pas la guerre. Mais la guerre, la lutte armée de libération nationale, a été le seul issue pour reconquérir notre dignité de peuple africain, notre dignité humaine. Nous devons nous considérer comme des soldats, maintes fois anonymes, mais des soldats de l'humanité, sur le vaste front de lutte qu'est l'Afrique de nos jours. Comme tous les peuples du monde, nous voulons vivre en paix. Nous voulons travailler en paix. Comme tous les peuples du monde, nous avons droit à nous rebeller. Nous avons aujourd'hui une base légale pour la rébellion, pour revendiquer nos droits. Nous avons la Charte des Nations Unies, nous avons les résolutions des Nations Unies. Nous sommes en train de prouver que des peuples comme les nôtres est capable, au dépens de ce sacrifice et de ces efforts, de battre un ennemi non seulement plus avancé du point de vue technique, mais soutenu par des forces puissantes des impérialistes dans le monde. D'autre part, devant le monde et devant l'Afrique, nous demandons, est-ce que les Portugais avaient raison quand ils affirmaient que nous sommes des peuples non civilisés, des peuples sans culture? Nous demandons, quelle est la plus brillante manifestation de civilisation et de culture que celle donnée par un peuple qui prend les armes pour défendre sa patrie, pour défendre son droit à la vie, au progrès, au travail et au bonheur?
Viva il popolo di Portugal e Guinea-Bissau verde! Viva unità di lotta! Viva Cabral!
Qu'est-ce qui fait d'un homme un héros? Ses paroles, ses actions, ou peut-être ses visions? C'était un visionnaire, un homme d'action, et ses paroles résonnent encore dans les oreilles de ceux qu'il a libérés, tout comme il inspire ceux qui ne le sont pas encore.
Nous sommes confiants. Nous sommes confiants dans la destinée de l'Afrique.
Passionné et fasciné par l'humanité, il cherchait à rendre plus noble la vie d'un chacun, à éradiquer par tous les moyens l'injustice qui disait être une tumeur qui contamine l'homme. Ce même homme qui à l'époque sortait des deux guerres les plus atroces de son histoire. Pour réaliser son rêve, pour se rapprocher le plus possible de sa vision qui n'avait rien d'utopique, il fallait d'après lui un plan, une théorie, une connaissance profonde de la cause pour laquelle il s'était engagé corps et âme. Il disait « Personne n'a encore réalisé une révolution victorieuse sans théorie révolutionnaire. » Et cette théorie a surgi en lui comme un don, longtemps avant qu'il n'exprime ces mots de sagesse. Mots qui quelque part insinuent que sa théorie lui était propre, propre à son temps et propre à son continent. Cabral sempre segui exemplos de seu pai. Juvenal Cabral nasceu na ilha de Santiago. Que livro que ele escreveu acompanha Amilcar Cabral durante toda sua vida. Na sua escrita tinha uma certa sensibilidade para o sofrimento de seu povo. Mesmo se seu pai e sua mãe eram cabo-verdianos, foi na Guiné que os veio encontrar. Assim como centenas de cabo-verdianos que naquele tempo foi obrigado a emigrar para morte de fome e falta de água. Assim também Amilcar Cabral bem nasceu na Guiné, mas mais tarde ele bem mudar para Cabo Verde. Os dois territórios portugueses para ele eram um país só. Il a grandi dans le jeu, la musique, le métissage de cette culture unique, à une époque où le peuple des dites îles fortunées ont commencé à s'identifier, à donner un nom à leur propre culture, à ce qui les rendait différents des Portugais. La capverdianidad venait de naître et s'implantait doucement dans la mentalité de ce peuple de plus en plus instruit et éduqué. La plume d'Amilcar Cabral nous a livré dès son plus jeune âge des poèmes qui nous offrent une image claire des pensées du jeune fils d'instituteur. Malgré le fait que les Portugais disaient du Cap-Vert, ici aussi c'est le Portugal. Oui, dans ses poèmes, il parlait d'un certain Fidmar, le fils de la mer, métissé, échoué sur ces îles qui souffraient une injustice qu'il avait du mal à comprendre.
Mãe adormecida, nua e esquecida, seca, batida pelos ventos, ao som da música, sem música.
Logo quando Amilcar chegou na Cabo Verde, ele olhou uma condição de vida que era muito duro para aguentar. Ele foi testemunho de pobreza e de fome no meio de seu povo.
Donc la famine qui a sévi pendant les années 40 au Cap-Vert, c'était un des événements prépondérants dans le développement, dans la conscience d'Amilcar Cabral, ayant vu autant de gens mourir de faim à cause d'un système colonial. Amilcar Cabral a compris qu'il fallait se débarrasser du colonialisme et établir justement un système économique qui soit à même de nourrir le peuple. Et non, comme c'était le cas, de nourrir une élite qui n'avait rien à voir avec les populations africaines.
Tout ce qu'on avait avant, c'était des colonialistes qui ne voulaient pas forcément prendre en compte que l'Afrique avait une histoire avant eux. L'histoire de l'Afrique commence selon les manuels, quand les colons sont arrivés. Sauf que maintenant, nous, notre travail, c'est de voir ce qu'il y avait avant et voir le point de vue du peuple africain, même pendant la colonisation, parce qu'il y a deux versions de l'histoire.
The relationship between Africa and Europe have dated long time past, but we have that moment of colonialism, moment of slave trades that were so destructive, and we cannot pretend about the past. Otherwise, we will not be able to conscientiously deal with the present. And because we have obligation to secure the future, we must take all of these bridges into consideration to correct the past, to build the present faithfully and conscientiously, and to secure our future. This is the right direction I think we should go.
Sima Cabral inspira na seu pai, na sua origem, e também me queria inspirar na Cabral, na sua escrita. Para modo, se me espiar para aquela revolução recente na Tunésia, povo africano de acordar com a ajuda de novas tecnologias, e se me comparar a esse facto, uma luta de descolonialização de Amilcar Cabral, me te realizar que isso tudo é baseado na mesma ideologia, uma necessidade de reafricanizar que te criar uma educação de povo.
Nous voulons que dans nos pays martyrisés pendant des siècles, bafoués, insultés, que dans nos pays jamais l'insulte puisse régner. Jamais que nos peuples soient exploités. Pas seulement par les impérialistes, chers amis. Pas seulement par les Européens. Pas seulement par les gens de peau blanche. Parce que nous ne confondons pas l'exploitation ou les facteurs de l'exploitation avec la couleur des peaux des hommes. Non, nous ne voulons plus d'exploitation chez nous, même pas par les Noirs.
Et pour l'ère post-coloniale, pour la route que l'Afrique devait suivre, Amilcar semblait avoir un plan. Comment a-t-il mené cette guerre qui dès le début semblait impossible aux yeux du monde? Comment a-t-il pu développer ce style de combat intellectuel et charismatique en même temps? Se faire des amis dans les deux camps, des deux côtés du rideau de fer, en pleine guerre froide. Il fallait être humain, profondément humain, et y croire aussi, pour faire la guerre contre un pays, et malgré ça, défendre les intérêts du peuple portugais. Que pouvons-nous tirer de sa sagesse? Que pouvons-nous apprendre de ce chef de tribu, ce griot, ce troubadour dont les idées et les écrits sont d'une actualité hors du commun, théorie qui aujourd'hui semble plus vraie que jamais.
Ele foi estratega político, diplomático, militar do PAIGC. A luta que muita gente diz que foi uma das melhores em África foi dirigido por ele. Ele pensava em todos os níveis.
C'est vraiment, il y a quelque chose qui sort de cette personne, un caractère fort. On le voit tantôt sérieux, tantôt souriant sur certaines photos, et il a une prestance. C'est un homme qui a une prestance, ou un charisme si on veut.
Cabral sempre elogia a coragem de que a mulher e homem anônimo à volta dele. De modo que mim, como cabralista, deve mostrar a cara quando me defende uma luta muito mais persistente que a ser e que também muito mais longe que a existência.
Era uma pessoa multifacetada. Basta pensar que, por exemplo, para além de engenheiro, era poeta, para além de poeta, também escreveu o hino da Guiné. E nós vimos no Cabral um diplomata que até hoje conseguiu feitos extraordinários.
Nous devons cependant à ce moment nous rappeler que toutes les monnaies dans la vie ont deux faces. Toutes les réalités ont des aspects positifs et négatifs. À l'action positive, c'est opposé. Il s'oppose toujours une action négative.
We have the line of the people who speaks the truth. And those who speak the truth appreciate love. And those who appreciate love also appreciate humanism as a focus of political leadership and administration. And these are the people that walk in the light of the livings.
Às vezes dá-me a impressão que anos de 50, 60 ou 70 foi de que o maior momento para africanos. Não tinha líderes que acordar. E quando eles acordar, eles despertar tudo quem estava à volta deles. Infelizmente, muitos deles morrem cedo. Morrer de forma que não era natural. Muitos deles tinham mistérios para trás. Eles tinham uma coragem que nunca estou hoje em dia. Um homem só era capaz de mudar um país. Vou pôr em conta a mão aquele número de heróis excepcionalmente iluminado que não teve na África. E Cabral é um deles.
Cabral is a great inspiration for all of us, particularly Pan-African intellectuals, because he addressed a number of fundamental questions that face Africa then. And the analysis of Cabral around the question of class, the question of domination, the question of imperialism, the question of neo-colonialism is still as relevant as it was today. And I think that this is what inspires us, the second generation of Pan-Africanists in the continent, to say, how do you then take Africa out of economic subjugation? How do you defend Africa from Western imperialism? How do you fight against neo-colonialism in the continent?
Ele já no passado, há 37 anos atrás, quando ele vivia, 30 e tal anos atrás, ele conseguiu ter essa visão que até agora não se concretizou. Nós ainda continuamos à procura de emancipação, porque o que ele dizia, ele tinha uma frase que não me recordo bem, mas ele dizia qualquer coisa como: o que um homem africano quer é a sua liberdade para poder construir na base de paz e progresso a sua vida. E é isso que até hoje nós não temos. Não temos essa liberdade do ponto de vista financeiro, não temos essa liberdade do ponto de vista de mesmo que os nossos governantes que estão lá acabam por estar reféns de um sistema que só beneficia uma parte.
Essa ausência de identificação, para mim, é uma homenagem para tudo que é soldado anónimo que morreu na luta, de um lado e do outro de linha de frente. Se vou querer oprimir um país, um povo, uma raça, proibir de ouvir música. Por isso que este gajo proíbe funaná, o batuque. Se você quer reinventar um povo, um país, um continente, na boa maneira, conta essa história de bom ponto de vista. Cabral chega a dizer esse movimento de libertação nacional, no momento que ele está subsair, ele terá ser força na cultura, na determinação e na capacidade de ser povo de preservar sua identidade cultural.
Est-ce que je suis émancipé?
A minha cena naquele tempo, então cantava músicas de nossa terra, que se chamava Tuco, Funaná, que era coisa proibida, que eu deixava de cantar, que é tudo escondido.
Porque um dia que a África conseguir se emancipar culturalmente, isso quer dizer que tem um avanço para emancipar financeiramente. E isso, ninguém, as potências não estão dispostas a isso. As pessoas querem ver em África duas coisas. Um lugar onde toda a gente vai ter desculpas de dizer estamos a fazer alguma coisa para os pobres. E um lugar onde toda a gente pode ir lá e falar com os governantes e ter acesso aos nossos recursos naturais. Nós estamos a ver é que para o futuro os recursos naturais estão todos em África. E é isso que as pessoas querem ter à mão.
Amilcar Cabral était émancipé, c'est clair. Pas seulement du colonialisme, mais également de toutes les doctrines ou des idéologies qui circulaient à cette époque-là. Il n'y a qu'à lire Lutte et Unité pour voir qu'il avait une réflexion propre, indépendante des idéologies communistes ou de l'idéologie capitaliste. Donc, malgré la bipolarité de cette époque, il a réussi à trouver une voie propre, une voie à lui-même, et c'est ce qu'il voulait également pour son peuple.
O movimento claridoso, para mim, é a emancipação de cultura cabo-verdiana. Muito antes de ser independente, o primeiro grande passo que nos dá na direção de liberdade de expressão artística foi o movimento claridoso. Nós bem começamos a criar uma escrita numa língua nossa, baseada na nossa situação socioeconômica. Um zeitgeist cabo-verdiano que fica eternizado na revista Claridade. E assim nossa poesia era muito inspirada no mundo velho, na Portugal, no romantismo português. Mas quando eu queria afastar de um país, que botita procurar boa identidade de bossa, bota começar a pôr um ponto de interrogação traz tudo o que está bem daquele país que tita controlou. Assim os poetas bem começam a basear-se criatividade na realidade de seus dia a dia, na realidade do povo de Cabo Verde. Eles começaram a falar na fome, falar na seca. O que antes era ilhas afortunadas, bem voltar ilhas secas. Claridade, modo, isso é uma iluminação. E Cabral, desde cedo, tinha consciência disso. Quando ele tinha 28 anos, ele chegou a escrever num boletim de propaganda publicado na praia. O poeta agora anda de mãos dadas com o povo e de pés fincados na terra. Agora não bem comparar essa iluminação, essa claridade com o que está acontecendo mais jovem cabo-verdiano na diáspora, ou mesmo na nossa terra. Não te começar a ouvir música de estrangeiro, a consumir arte e uma cultura que nem é nossa. Mas depois te chegar um dia onde é que não te realizar, mas não tem nosso próprio valor, nossa própria cultura também. Uma cultura forte, baseada na África. Cabral estava a falar na reafricanização. Nesse momento que botei essa iluminação de reconhecer o valor de boa terra, é uma claridade também. Isso é uma emancipação. E é lá que nós luta de começar.
L'éveil, pour moi, ça a commencé, je vais dire, je pense vers l'âge de 15 ans plus ou moins. Je n'ai jamais été particulièrement fier d'être un Africain, c'est même le contraire, j'avais honte d'être africain, parce qu'on me disait l'Africain il est primitif, l'Africain il est pauvre, l'Africain il n'est pas éduqué, etc. Donc j'ai cherché des modèles ailleurs. Et c'est comme ça que j'ai découvert le rap. Et le rap m'a donné quand même une fierté. Parce que c'était les Noirs, ils étaient populaires, ils étaient admirés. Et c'est comme ça que lentement j'ai commencé à m'informer. Et à travers le rap américain, j'ai découvert les Panthères Noirs, les Black Panthers. Et c'est là que j'ai commencé aussi à m'intéresser à la politique ou au domaine social.
Pour nous, se libérer, vraiment, c'est un acte de culture. C'est reprendre sa propre culture sans minimiser la culture des autres. Nous créons une vie nouvelle sur le plan artistique, sur le plan culturel donc. Et c'est dans ce cadre que nous développons un esprit nouveau de fierté pour tous les aspects positifs de notre culture, parce que chaque culture comporte aussi des aspects négatifs. Nous cherchons à assimiler des autres cultures ce qui est applicable chez nous, tout ce qui a un caractère universel, pour se développer chaque jour davantage dans le sens infini des possibilités immenses de l'homme.
Por exemplo, na conversa dele com movimentos afros nos Estados Unidos da América, Cabral já pensava como negro e pensava na emancipação. Quando ele dizia emancipação, era uma coisa cultural, porque ele diz que a liberdade parte da nossa cultura. Nós temos que se sentir livres para manifestar a nossa cultura.
We think that in a certain way or manner, our fight in Africa against colonialism and imperialism is also a proof of understanding of your problem, and in a certain manner also a contribution for the solution of your problems in this continent.
E quando ele, por exemplo, nos Estados Unidos da América diz os negros, a vossa luta é a nossa luta é a vossa luta, isso é uma coisa que para aquela gente é muito interessante, porque muita gente pensava assim, bom, isso é africanos, nós somos americanos, mas não foi isso que aconteceu.
Naturally, the inverse is also true. To the solution of your problems here is a great contribution from our own struggle.
O que eu estava a dizer é, vocês enquanto africanos, enquanto negros, nós enquanto negros, temos que estar juntos para lutar, porque o que nós temos vindo a ver não é só questão de luta de africanos, é questão de luta de negros. E ser negro, independentemente de ser negro em América, ser negro na América do Sul, ser negro em África, temos sempre os mesmos problemas, somos sempre vítimas das mesmas coisas. E o Cabral diz é, ou nós juntamos e emancipamos, ou então corremos o risco de ficar sempre sob domínio.
Each day more here, the Africans born in America are conscious of their responsibilities faced to the struggle in Africa.
Ce que nous pouvons apprendre d'Amilcar Cabral, pour moi en tout cas en premier lieu, c'est la fierté. La fierté d'être ce qu'on est, c'est-à-dire les Africains. Car j'ai longtemps vécu avec cette honte parce que je croyais cette rhétorique que l'Africain est primitif, que l'Africain n'a pas de culture, que l'Africain n'a pas d'histoire. Et lui, déjà à cette époque, il nous montrait que ce n'était pas le cas, que nous sommes le premier peuple. C'est de l'Afrique que viennent les premières civilisations. Même si beaucoup d'historiens le nient, c'est un fait avéré. Les premières cultures sont africaines. Et donc, aujourd'hui, ce que l'Afrique a besoin en premier lieu, c'est d'avoir confiance en elle-même.
Porque eu não acredito que possa haver uma outra forma da África se desenvolver sem emancipação cultural, que está na base mesmo de tudo. A nossa emancipação cultural, depois a liberdade e depois dizer eu quero fazer o meu progresso, eu quero fazer o meu desenvolvimento. Não é eu tenho que desenvolver como a Europa, eu tenho que desenvolver como os outros acham que é desenvolvimento. Eu tenho que desenvolver consoante as circunstâncias do meu país. Tenho que ter o melhor da qualidade de vida, mas não tenho que ter aquilo que os outros dizem que é melhor, porque o melhor é sempre subjetivo. Mas analisando os casos, as circunstâncias e sabendo o que é que eu tenho, sei o que é que eu posso fazer para melhor.
Comprendre qu'on peut y arriver sans automatiquement reprendre les schémas des Européens. Et ce n'est pas parce qu'on réussit à s'enrichir au détriment des autres qu'on doit faire la même chose. Je suis persuadé qu'on peut arriver à un développement africain avec des idées africaines, avec des concepts africains.
Porque o próprio Cabral, na altura de luta, ainda falava como e que portugueses que estão na Guiné, que esse inimigo, esse sistema, manga de gente que apanha na luta, é tratar-los direito. Prisioneiros, tem que receber direito, é levantado Portugal.
Le peuple de Saint-Tomé a été des premiers à subir des massacres de la part des colonistes portugais. En 1953, si je ne me trompe pas.
Não tem muitas coisas que enterrar gente.
Dans une journée, les colonistes portugais ont tué 1000 personnes, 1000 Africains, sur une population de 40 000 personnes.
Muitas plantas que a gente enterra gente, isso não é planta.
Pourquoi? Parce qu'ils ne voulaient pas s'assujettir, se soumettre au travail forcé.
Portugal, que é um país católico, Portugal tem a Fátima e tem essa ligação com o Vaticano. E depois Cabral acaba por conseguir ser recebido por Papa, no momento em que todos os aliados de Portugal levantavam a voz contra aquela atitude, porque era de certa forma uma derrota que nem os países europeus queriam ver. E eles conseguiram, chegaram lá e ele foi porta-voz daquilo. Aquilo foi um momento de maior derrota do fascismo. A desculpa que se utilizava era: são povos não civilizados, nós vamos expandir a fé, vamos levar cristianismo para os países africanos. E esse próprio embrião do cristianismo, o Vaticano acaba por receber povos que reclamam a independência daquilo contra aquela potência que a partir deixava a fazer o trabalho que o Vaticano queria. Isso é uma coisa extraordinária.
Será que naquele tempo nosso povo tinha passado pela luta armada para obter independência? Vocês tinham meios de comunicação que não têm hoje em dia, Facebook ou Twitter?
Então lembro naquele tempo antigo que então olhava minha avó, com minha mãe, estava lugar para trabalhar na terra, para cima, para tentar desses filhos comida. Mulher se trabalhava duro. Portanto, é por isso que mulher africana tem que ter um valor único, um valor de ouro, que mora esse trabalho com orgulho, com amor.
Cabral era, para que está passando, era alguém muito ligado à criança. Nessas fotos, estou a olhar sempre que meninos da mão, meninos que não brincam aquela. Pioneiros em José Cabral, desde tempo de luta, pioneiros de luta. Aquilo é importante para ver como crianças, no deles futuro, não entendem, o país não vem avança.
Sem cambareta, eu teria estado tudo no chão. Mas de noite não cantava, depois de reza, não cantava aquelas músicas para nos divertir.
Como é que eu posso contribuir para que os meus filhos e os meus netos venham a saber que existiu naquela terra, entre aqueles dois povos, uma pessoa assim, uma pessoa que trabalhou, que tinha ideologia, uma pessoa que tem um projeto que, se eu não conseguir concretizar, o meu filho deve tentar concretizar. Se não conseguir, tem que passar para o filho dele. Porque eu acredito muito sinceramente que a emancipação cultural é o caminho para o desenvolvimento da África. E isso tem que ser um trabalho de todos os africanos.
Je peux vous dire ici, nous sommes engagés avec nos peuples. Nous luttons pour la libération totale de nos peuples. Mais nous ne luttons pas tout simplement pour mettre un drapeau dans notre pays et pour avoir un hymne.
Pois a nível cultural, Guiné tem 20 e tal etnias, quase 30 etnias. E uma coisa muito interessante, Cabral conseguiu juntá-las. Por exemplo, na tempo de luta. E era ser alguém competente para conseguir perceber como eu podia juntar 30 etnias. O que é mais importante na nossa luta e para nós tudo do mesmo lado. E que tem a raça, que tem que outro. Muçulmanos, católicos, animistas, cultura diferente, língua diferente, tudo humildade, a mim um som de boss. igual, suma voz, povo, suma voz, então utilizar esse PBS e de voz, traços culturais. Que é uma coisa muito bom. Cabral é alguém que conhece cultura de Guiné. Era tudo coisas que preciso conhecer para lutar. Que é coisas que não falha hoje na Guiné, mal, né? Carata fala um bom dirigente e tem que ser a população e tem que ser na metade da população. Para você ver que é necessidade, que ele se passa, para poder conseguir trabalhar. Para ver, que não estão olhando na Guiné, na África, e dirigentes que vivem lá nessa ilha. Cabral, antes de começar essa luta, primeiro que fazia aproveitar o trabalho que tem, né? Para contactar toda a população, para conhecer cultura. Porque a cultura é a coisa mais importante que a gente tem. Aquilo que é importante na Guiné, para a gente perceber como diversidade cultural que a Guiné tem, né? E riqueza. Tem 20 e tal povo num espaço pequenino. Que ser riqueza, cada quem que se lado, Aquilo é uma coisa importante.
Souvent on définit Amilcar Cabral comme un marxiste ou un communiste, mais ce n'est pas le cas. Ceux qui sont informés sur les conceptions que se faisait Amilcar Cabral sur l'économie verront vite qu'il n'a jamais parlé, par exemple, d'économie planifiée. Ce n'était pas dans ses idées. Ce qui primait dans son approche, c'était tout d'abord l'indépendance politique et économique. C'était un des points très importants de la théorie révolutionnaire d'Amilcar Cabral, c'est-à-dire ne pas avoir ce qu'on a eu par la suite dans beaucoup d'États africains, le néocolonialisme. Et donc, loin du marxisme, Cabral ne voulait pas d'économie centralisée, ne voulait pas d'économie planifiée. Il voulait une économie qui serve l'intérêt du peuple. Donc, une économie qui, en premier lieu, soit à même de nourrir le peuple, et en second lieu, capable aussi d'enrichir le peuple, car Amilcar Cabral n'a jamais souhaité d'un peuple pauvre.
Il faut arrêter de marxiser les pensées d'Amilcar Cabral. Dans son idéologie, il ne s'agit pas d'une continuation du marxisme, mais d'une dérivation non dogmatique. Pour lui, la théorie est une arme. Car il écrit « Le défaut idéologique au sein des mouvements de libération nationale constitue une des plus grandes, sinon la plus grande faiblesse de notre lutte contre l'impérialisme. »
Karl Marx did not invent nor found socialism, even though many people say that. He just discovered it, that's all. He discovered the laws of socialism. He didn't found it. We call in America the laws of gravity Newton's laws, but Newton cannot invent that a body falls at 32 feet per second squared. Marx cannot invent that where capital oppresses labor, that labor will rise up and overthrow capital. Marx cannot invent this. As a matter of fact, go and read Ibn Khaldun, an African in Tunisia, who in his writings used terms like surplus value, property, rights of property. He used all the terms that Karl Marx used, and he was an African.
Amilcar sur le marxisme. Lorsque Marx créa le marxisme, il n'était pas membre d'une société tribale. Je pense que pour nous, il n'est pas nécessaire d'être plus marxiste que Marx, ou plus léniniste que Lénine dans l'application de leur théorie.
Nous réservons le droit de décider nous-mêmes. Et si par hasard, nos options, nos décisions coïncident avec celles des autres, c'est pas notre faute, peut-être c'est la faute des autres.
Because what Cabral wanted to do was to dismantle a colonial state and replace it with an African state that is going to articulate the aspirations of African masses. And others, they are seeking, instead of dismantling the apartheid state or the colonial state, they were moving for reform. to reform the same state of oppression with a view that it will play a leading role in articulating the aspirations of the people. And these are the challenges that we have in Africa today. So Cabral and Cabralism and all these teachings is still as fundamental as critical for Africa's future today.
Pour moi, un cabraliste, c'est quelqu'un qui a les idées pour lesquelles luttait Amilcar Cabral. Donc il peut l'être parce qu'il a connu, ou il connaît, ou il fait des recherches sur Amilcar Cabral, il peut le devenir, mais il peut l'être aussi déjà avant, sans le savoir, avoir cet état d'esprit, donc qui passe par les paroles, peut-être par les actes, par l'écriture, et c'est quelque chose que tu as déjà en toi avant. Donc pour moi, c'est ça. De toute façon, le cabralisme, c'est venu ces derniers temps. Et avant, je crois, de son époque, on n'en parlait pas. C'est comme tous les mouvements littéraires, on les a nommés après coup. Parce qu'on a jugé que c'était important et que beaucoup de personnes avaient cet état d'esprit-là à un moment donné. Et donc, on le confine à un moment donné.
Eu olho para a história, olho para a ideia de Cabral, digo só assim, eu só me posso sentir orgulhoso por saber que nasci num país que teve um líder assim. Isso é uma coisa que a mim me deixa completamente orgulhoso e posso dizer às pessoas, eu sou cabralista.
Je suis persuadé qu'il faut étudier Cabral et que nos dirigeants feraient bien de s'inspirer de son modèle, de s'inspirer de sa rhétorique, de s'inspirer de son action. Et même si ce sera difficile, et ça l'est toujours, il faut prendre comme exemple ces révolutionnaires. Et je pense à des gens comme Thomas Sankara, qui est un des seuls présidents qui, je pense, ait mis vraiment en pratique cette rhétorique, cette théorie, pas seulement de Cabral, mais dont Cabral, à mon sens, est le représentant le plus grand e le plus clair.
Temos que conhecer a história de Cabral, o que ele defendia, as coisas dele. Temos que colocar isso em prática. E depois temos que acreditar que podemos fazer passar a mensagem dele, podemos agir desta forma, não sendo ele, mas podemos dar continuidade àquilo que o assassinato dele não permitiu. Para que o cabralismo seja realidade.
C'est pas quelque chose qui se confine maintenant à la couleur de peau. C'est quelque chose vraiment qui est... c'est un état d'esprit qui est intergénérationnel, qui dépasse les frontières, qui dépasse tout ce qu'on veut.
Porque a realidade do cabralismo é a libertação da África, a meu ver. A libertação da África, porque no dia em que as ideias que o Cabral defendia, as coisas que o Cabral defendia concretizem, nós estaremos aqui a dizer, ok, finalmente emancipados. E isso é o arranque do desenvolvimento sem precedentes.
Nous, notre force, c'est la force de la justice, c'est la force du progrès, c'est la force de l'histoire. Et la justice, le progrès, l'histoire sont l'apanage du peuple. Parce que notre force fondamentale, ce sont nos peuples, chers amis. Ce sont nos peuples qui soutiennent nos organisations, qui sacrifient chaque jour en nourrissant tous les besoins de notre lutte. Ce sont nos peuples qui garantissent l'avenir et la certitude de notre victoire.
Camaradas e ouvintes, acabaram de ouvir do nosso secretário-geral, camarada Amilcar Cabral. Esta é a Rádio Libertação, a voz do povo da Guiné e Cabo Verde em luta.
Tem jovens africanos que não pensam em Cabral.
Les jeunes, il faut pas croire qu'ils sont pas intéressés.
Tem jovens que me disseram cabralista.
Il y a ceux qui vont suivre la mode Amilcar Cabral parce que pour eux c'est pas seulement justement une mode, mais c'est vraiment un état d'esprit, c'est quelqu'un, une personne réelle qui est derrière Et il y en a d'autres qui connaissent rien du tout et qui vont appeler ça la mode, vraiment Amilcar Cabral, comme ils ont la mode baggy, la mode casquette à l'envers, sans même savoir d'où ça vient.
Então, boy rapper, vou-te considerar bom mesmo um revolucionário inspirado na Cabral. Camarada combatente nossa era, de pedir ser reconhecido como tal. Em vez de escrever poesia acima ele, vos rima botar repaz. Mas camarada, vos rima que tem nada a ver com a ideologia de Cabral. De facto, a palavra foi sempre ser a arma principal. Só que era sem brutalidade, mas com vocabulário selecionado e educado. Sem violência, mas com inteligência. Então, troca aquelas palavras violentas para algo mais inteligente, algo mais procurado. Inspirar na livre, na homem beijo, na tradição e na cultura do meu país e do continente. Se vou querer para vos rimas ser continuação de poesia da Amilcar Cabral, então pega borracha na mão e vou caderno naquele outro, vou limpar tudo que as mães que vou mandar. Respeitar a mulher, que vou tratar as bitches, se ela está namora. Modas é mãe de vos filhos, mãe de próxima geração que te está bem para esse mundo. Vou inimigo, que vou rebaixá-lo verbalmente. Modo Cabral sempre respeita seu amigo. Se vou querer ser cabralista, estudar, modo ele foi um aluno exemplar. Criar, modo ele era um grande artista. Jogar bola, modo ele foi campeão de futebol também. E inspirar na boa próxima, modo ainda ele também inspira. Tchau. E quando vou te botar na bom caminho, dá que mão na peito e vou dizer a mim é cabralista.
À tous ceux qui connaissent l'histoire, de la divulguer.
So that we can bring the Cabralism and what Cabral stood for into a public debate with the view of educating Africans in terms of how to prepare for the future.
Si on a des convictions, il faut vraiment se battre pour ça. Je dis pas forcément avec les armes, mais avec les mots, avec les actions positives.
Eu acho que se eu vivesse naquele tempo, sem dúvida seria um combatente. Era incapaz de estar a ver uma luta justa, por uma causa justa, para o meu povo, e eu estar ali. Das duas uma. Ou estava de um lado ou estava do outro. Dificilmente podia estar do lado de Portugal, só se me apanhassem à força. Mas isto também é a primeira oportunidade, voltava, porque eu sei sempre identificar os meus.
S'il fallait les affronter au front vraiment avec une arme à la main, je sais pas si ça j'aurais été capable de le faire, mais selon mes capacités à moi, j'aurais pu les aider.
Quem que mata Cabral? Como é que alguém está tendo a coragem de matar um líder? Alguém que não luta para a terra, que não luta para a África, para a melhoria do mundo possível.
Unfortunately, our leaders that are so inspiring that are supposed to take the front seat in driving inspirations, most of them had been eliminated.
It's unfortunate that he died so early when he had so much to contribute in an African affairs.
E como humano, quer dizer, ninguém que conhece a história de Cabral ou que estava naquela época próximo de Cabral poder fazer alguma coisa dessa.
Vraiment, c'est le héros et voilà, il faut honorer sa mémoire parce que c'est celui qui a aidé vraiment concrètement à aboutir à l'indépendance.
Viver naquela época e receber notícia da morte de Amilcar Cabral, o que eu ia fazer?
Um desespero.
Então, a primeira coisa que me está a fazer me está a chorar. A primeira coisa está a ser com tristeza.
E uma notícia, pronto, desesperado.
Que me está a ressentir mesmo, no fundo do meu coração está a ser uma grande tristeza e está a saber que não perdeu o mais grande líder que Cabo Verde tinha.
Sabendo que se está corre o mundo inteiro atrás de tudo coisa, desesperadamente para libertar esse povo. Nós que está na terra, está à espera notícia com ansiedade para chegar para falar mas é livre. Então, um momento eu estou a falar minha memória. Não queria morrer hoje junto com ele.
E, poxa, que tristeza, uma raiva. Que certeza, uma raiva. E pode ser que me está a querer vingar. Me de certeza mesmo, estou já. Que me está a querer vingar. A coisa mais importante me está a achar que está cerca de tristeza. E sabia que não tinha, que no momento lá que não perdeu uma pessoa que ainda tinha um bocado de fazer. Pensar como é que Guiné tinha desenvolvido, se Amilcar Cabral ainda tinha vivido uns 10, 20 anos. A situação está a ser muito diferente.
Cabral que morre.
Amilcar Cabral não morre.
Cabral que pode morrer.
Se a ideia de continuar, e se me quer dizer, luta continua.
Eu tenho que pensar, Cabral, até dia que Guiné, Cabo Verde, a África desenvolve. Até dia que ideias Cabral concretizar.
E me tem aquela esperança que um dia, e me tem certeza, que um dia não estou a chegar naquele ponto onde a África para levantar e a África poder viver em paz e realmente independente.
Lá já não pude dar descanso. Lá já não pude falar, ok, Cabral morre, mas flores de sua luta concretiza esse trabalho. Acho que a África não melhor.
Temos, portanto, todas as razões para estar otimistas. Por isso mesmo, devemos estar preparados para vencer todas as dificuldades. Devemos reforçar a nossa ação sobre todos os planos, no trabalho político, na produção, nas escolas e nos hospitais. Devemos melhorar cada dia as nossas cabeças, ser cada vez mais conscientes, mais trabalhadores, mais ativos. Desenvolver a nossa iniciativa, corrigir os nossos erros e cumprir com entusiasmo, porque, afinal, a nossa terra é nossa. Os nossos compatriotas merecem cada dia mais a admiração e o apoio dos povos africanos e de todos os povos do mundo. Avante, pois, compatriotas e camaradas, pelo progresso na Guiné e em Cabo Verde. Avante, povo da Guiné e Cabo Verde, ao serviço do progresso da nossa terra, da África e da humanidade.
Temos que reafricanizar o espírito, uma coisa que ele inventou, uma coisa que ele diz. E a África boa. E as coisas tão impressionantes, tão bom, o espírito da solidariedade africana, que ninguém fala disso. Assumiam, somos africanos.
Africano, eu tenho tanta coisa bonita à volta de você. Para que vou desviar o olhar?
Para não avançar, para não abrir caminho largo, para não libertar nossa terra. Paz, progresso e felicidade do nosso povo. Rien dans la vie saura arrêter la marche de l'histoire que c'est de libérer tous les peuples et de donner à tous les peuples la possibilité de vivre une vie de paix, de dignité et de progrès. Merci.
Yep.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Thank y'all so much for joining us for that great film. I see some comments on Facebook and YouTube. Folks are enjoying it. Now is the time for our group discussion of the movie. Kendra and DJ Bill, what are some of your thoughts that came up for y'all?
You can go first, DJ Bill.
Well, some initial thoughts that I had, I was really reflecting on trying to make sense of Cabralism. This is my first time hearing of it because you hear notes of pacifism, but it's not, he wasn't pacifist and that wasn't his message, you know what I mean? You hear notes of socialism, but it wasn't really socialist. So of course, that's why they came up with Cabralism. And so I was just very, since this was like, I'm still trying to make sense in my mind, like trying to compute since it's so different from what I'm learning about other African histories and ways of rebellion and things like that. And I was just very, very impressed at the humanistic approach. And off of just watching it, it causes me to want to adopt some of the, ideologies that were presented in the film already, so.
What about you?
Okay.
There you go.
I'm unmuted. Okay. I definitely resonate with that, DJ Brill. And I liked so much about this. This is the first time I'm hearing about Cabral and the work he's done. And, you know, I could feel the reverence in the persons who were interviewed. Like, you know, they look up to this person, you know, like a generation or two later, there are still people talking about what he has done for the people in Africa, not just in Cape Verde and Guinea, but, you know, around the world, which I think is really, really cool. I think I really, you know, it's great to like think or to view Pan-Africanism, you know, people have thought about me and, you know, people who live here in the States, you know, they're far away geographically, but we're going through the same struggle. And I feel like that, you know, that empowers me. And so in like thinking about Pan-Africanism, like it just makes me feel really good inside to know that, you know, I'm not just unified here in my own community. Like literally there's, you know, we're out here, we're out here in Africa. We're out here, you know, doing this work to liberate ourselves and to have our own identity and to be proud of our own culture and to preserve that cultural identity, I think is really, really awesome and important. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with y'all. I knew a bit about Amilcar Cabral and about Guinea-Bissau and the PAIGC going into the movie. Like I knew, for example, that the very first APRP work study circle was Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Sékou Touré, and a man named Lamine Yanga. So Amilcar Cabral was like part of the APRP. The PAIGC is like in the APRP, and he was like one of the founding members of this party that we're all a part of. So I knew that. One of the things that struck me about the movie was definitely the discussion of like re-Africanization, of using the strength of our history and our culture and identity as like a basis of waging our struggle for liberation, about how important it was that regardless of what it was called, that the strategies for liberation of our people around the world like came from us. What did y'all think about that?
I go first, teacher. Oh wait, sorry, did you mute me?
Did you want to go? Taking me a while to unmute, that's why.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, on that point, re-Africanization, I definitely wrote that term down. Like waking up, I wanted to ask you all kind of, because I feel like us as a, like, I feel like if you're a member of the AAPRP, you've gone through your own re-Africanization. And so I wanted to ask, you know, us here, you know, when did we have that realization? I think someone in the movie mentioned, you know, 15 years old. I was, you know, I was not in tune with, you know, the Portuguese and like their education and writings and whatnot. So I got into rap, and that's how I, you know, developed my own Africanization. So like, what do you all like it, whether, you know, be joining the APRP or even prior to that, what thoughts do you all have regarding your own like journey?
So it was like a two-step process for me, because so my family's from Honduras and from Haiti, and so I always understood myself to be black, and I always understood that black to have like an international context, but I didn't necessarily connect that to Africa until I joined the APRP. And it was through joining the APRP and like learning about the history of African liberation, learning about how it was Pan-Africanist from the very beginning. Like we saved ourselves last night for the UNM-BSU, and like when we go through that presentation, you see how African people were resisting the slave trade, uniting across ethnic groups, uniting across like national organs to fight the slave trade in the Western Hemisphere. And so you see from the very beginning, the African liberation struggle was like Pan-African, and that continued like throughout the entire history. Africans uniting across tribes, across nations, across ethnicities to fight a common enemy. So like it was the APRP and learning that history, starting from slavery all the way through the anti-colonial struggles of the 20th century, that made me realize that I am black with an international context, but more importantly, I'm African. Like no matter where our people exist, we are African people, and that's always been the case. So that was kind of like the two-step process for me. What about you, Djibril?
Yeah, so two thoughts. The first thought is that I really wanted to hear more about re-Africanization in the film. I think the first part was just like laying out, like, who is this person? What happened? And we'll probably get into it in the second part, because I was so curious of hearing this first term, which brought insight to me of what the process going through AARP is, essentially, like you were saying, Kendra. It's like, I feel that most of my life I've been going through this process, but I didn't have the words for it. Because as a young girl, my entire family is from Peru, which is a very confusing country to be from when you're African, just because of people's understanding of history and expectations and things like that. But being a young girl and growing up in Peru for a little bit, I was always just very proud and excited and curious to know more about, like, why are we in Peru? Like, why are we here? You know what I mean? Like, because I never had a sense that Peru was my home, just how I don't have a sense that America was my home. And so through like the AAPRP process and through just searching into histories, I started to feel more like, okay, I know where my home is. It's in Africa, So it's just, I never had the vocabulary to explain what was happening. I always had a thirst. Just looking in the mirror, I was always like, I need an explanation behind this melanin. You know what I mean? So I'm very grateful for learning that term today, and I want to know more about it.
And then Comrade Erica, who is an editor with Hood Communist, also at Black Alliance for Peace, says on the topic of re-Africanization, she's reading this book called Black Socialists in the United States, Africa, and the Caribbean, that talks about the PAIGC and Amilcar Cabral. And in the book, they talk about the process and importance of re-Africanization and how it really cemented how important political education is to liberation movements. And I feel like that underlines what we're seeing about how the APRP contributed to our process of re-Africanization. Because it was like about learning. Once you learn the history of Africa, once you learn the history of African resistance, you begin to understand like how central Africa, the continent, is to who we are and is to how we fight. So thanks for pointing that out, Erica. Also, another thing that stood out to me was like that he was in conversation with Africans in the United States during like the civil rights struggle, where he was like, "You're Africans, like unite with us globally." I was like, well, I didn't even know that before this documentary. What did y'all think about that?
I wanted to know more about that. Like when I heard that, and then also just the part about his ability to unite the 30 different ethnicities. So homeboy is relating to like Black Americans at that time. He's relating to like the 30 ethnic groups. He's uniting people together, and people are very receptive to him. I'm like, I need to know what's in the juice, homie. Like it's like, that takes so much skill and strategy and commitment and compassion and the willingness to humble yourself so much that 50 some odd different cultural groups in general, like including the Black Americans of that time, were relating to you. Like, I need to know more about that,
Absolutely, yes. I also had to make that note. I was like, wait, what? How did you how? That's amazing. And it like I guess for me, it's the what is that phrase? The enemy. No, I don't know if that actually works here. Was it the enemy of my enemy is my friend? That doesn't. Well, I don't know. Maybe because maybe those like there might have been little conflicts with ethnic groups, right? But we all see that there's a higher, oppressive fascist force, Portugal, that's dominating everyone, and we're all in these forced labor conditions together. The Portuguese, they just see us as uncivilized Black people or Africans. So it's like, wait, we are, let's not squabble anymore. If we, whatever cultural differences we might have had, we are all African. We are all Africans being subjected to this power that should not be here at all. We need to unite, have a unified force. Doesn't matter if you're over the river, like they look at us the same, right? So we should unify. So I think I suspect he used that type of rhetoric in communicating, and even with the language barriers, you can still see like what's happening in your own community and what's happening to our people. So like, yeah, it kind of reminds me of the United States and how I could go to New York City or LA, and any like the Black people there, Africans there, like we all understand what's going on here in the United States. It's we are in the know because of our conditions here.
And then another comrade pointing out in the comments or asking how many languages that Amilcar Cabral speak. And in this documentary, he speaks French, Portuguese, and English. So the man knew many very difficult languages, and I'm sure he knew like indigenous African languages as well. And that's like remarkable to me. I only speak 2, 3 like half-assed. So yeah, it's just very like amazing that he had like this capacity to communicate with Africans across so many different ethnic groups, across so many geographical contexts, and like bring us all together. But one thing that I kind of struggled with in the movie was that I kind of feel like it almost like it like held him up as like unique. And that to me, like I struggle with that a lot. One, because Amilcar Cabral did not emerge out of nowhere. Amilcar Cabral was part of like a movement across the entire African continent that included people like Patrice Lumumba, that included people like Thomas Sankara, who were mentioned, but also included people like Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, like Sekou Touré in Guinea, like Robert Sobukwe in Tanzania. Like they all knew each other. They were all working together. So Amilcar Cabral was like in conversations with these people. They were developing strategies like in coordination. But I kind of felt like this documentary kind of was like Amilcar Cabral was like in a class of his own. And I guess maybe in some respects you could argue that, but the revolution in Guinea-Bissau would not have been successful if it was all on the shoulders of one man. It was the masses of people in Guinea-Bissau that won that, which is why even after he was assassinated, they were still successful in defeating Portugal. But I wonder if y'all felt that too, or if you disagree, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, what I was thinking about when I was watching it, it was similar to your thought, but I was thinking, I think I noticed some patriarchal notions throughout the film because of just how they're presenting this man. As far as we know, this was a cisgendered straight man, as far as we know, right? Who obviously had a lot of skill and power. However, there was a tone of seeing like how his power was being positioned or presented to us as unmatched. And that often is done in patriarchal societies and things like that, especially when it comes to a man who's done things. And so far in my history of watching documentaries about, cisgendered women and cisgendered men, I have seen that when women are being presented, they talk about all the help they had and, the history around it. But when men are being presented in documentaries and what they've accomplished, it's very individualistic. So that's what I did see throughout the film, that it's showing that he has a lot of followers and all these different things, but the way he was presented was that it was like everybody was waiting for his lead instead of all the co-collaboration that's very obvious that had to have happened for him to have that impact, and also lack of highlighting the community behind him that really molded him. It was all talking about how he found a book, how he talked to this person, but no, there's a community that cultivated this person. You get what I'm saying? So I agree with you, and those are the things that I saw and were questioning.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I remember points in the movie where it would say like the anonymous followers or the anonymous leaders. It's like, wait, I want to know who those people are, or at least acknowledgement that they, like there are people who stood with him, and I guess I would be interested to know, like, because they talked about what Marxism, and Cabral didn't, he was not a Marxist. So in that same vein, like they describe the tenets of Cabralism and what that means. But I also want to know, like, how did that term come up? Like within the community, like, did people, see Cabral as, he's coming up with his theories, but like what, like kind of Deidre, what you're saying is like, what formed that, like what in his environment shaped those tenets? And it wasn't, it wasn't just him. He wasn't born, and he wasn't, going through these things in a vacuum. Like he has been in community with other Africans there. So I guess I push back a little bit on like using a very specific term relating to someone's name. But I guess I don't know what thoughts you have, because I also think of Nkrumah, like like those terms, like the isms, right? So like how do we acknowledge the individual and their strengths without diminishing those who are like in communion with them, like those in community with them as well? Like how do we not ostracize the people who were also a part of the struggle in the movement?
And that to me brings up the book that we actually read earlier in work study. I'm not sure if both of you are here. I think you might have been Fighting Two Colonialisms by Stephanie Ardang, that talks about the revolution in Guinea-Bissau. The two colonialisms in the title are referring to obviously Portuguese colonialism that they were fighting the armed struggle against, but also patriarchy, like the internal oppression of African marginalized genders within Guinea-Bissau. And so it talks about how the strategy of the PAIGC was to organize like the entire population of Guinea-Bissau. Like the PAIGC to this day has millions of people in it. It's not a top-down organization. It's not a vanguard party. It's a mass party. So even presenting Amilcar Cabral in that particular way, where he was just like leading a people to free them rather than like creating the infrastructure for that people to liberate themselves, I feel like doesn't necessarily reflect the actual reality of the politics of the PAIGC and how that revolution was actually won. Because there's like, there's figures like Tadina Sila, who we've talked about before, who was like a leading figure of the PAIGC, who was a very young woman and a mother. Many people like her to this day who carry on the work of the PAIGC. So like, yeah, I just, like the way that Amilcar Cabral was presented as sort of like a singular figure in this documentary does not reflect how the PAIGC actually won the struggle for national liberation in Guinea-Bissau, and it does not reflect the current reality of the PAIGC. Like I feel like there's something being put on there coming from probably what Deidre Brill pointed out that is not necessarily coming from the PAIGC itself. But what are some other things that came up for y'all from the movie?
You can go, Deidre Brill, if you have anything.
I was looking at my notes, so you could go.
Oh, me too.
Well, one thing I appreciated was the use, like how they highlighted the use of culture, of African culture, and said it's not just enough to like say I am uplifting African culture by like using rap or whatever, and like that's automatically revolutionary. That you have to like return to the source. That you have to struggle the actual history of your people and how it's been used as a strategy of resistance and carry that work forward. And the reason why that stood out to me is because that Fred Hampton movie is out. It was out yesterday. Judas and the Black Messiah, that features or focuses on William O'Neill, who of course was the African man that betrayed Fred Hampton and got him killed alongside Mark Clark and other folks in that house. And the soundtrack of that movie features people like Nipsey Hussle, people like Jay-Z, and it's wild to me because I feel like if Fred Hampton were alive, he would be like, what the hell is Jay-Z doing on a soundtrack on a movie about me? Because Jay-Z is a black capitalist. Jay-Z is the antithesis of everything that Fred Hampton represented. But we're in a particular moment right now where people can just say, like, they can just invoke the names of revolutionaries without invoking their politics. And this happens particularly to African revolutionaries and still be celebrated. And so I really appreciated in the movie when they were like, it's not enough to just say, I follow Amilcar Cabral. Like, you have to live the ideas. You have to live the history of resistance. So yeah, did y'all think anything about that?
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if you could restate your question.
Like, do you see like the distinction between, for example, Jay-Z referencing Fred Hampton in a song about rap and a cultural work that comes directly from the history of African resistance that uses our culture as a weapon? Like the surface level way it's done now as the movie soundtrack as an example versus the way the people in the documentary are talking about using our culture. Like, do you see a difference, or am I tripping?
I don't think you're tripping. What you reminded of, there was a line that Cabral said where, we don't want exploitation here. We don't want European. We don't want Portuguese. I don't care about your skin color. If you're black, we don't want exploitation here. Like, not even from our black brethren do we want exploitation here. So it reminds me of that, the black bourgeoisie. It's like, okay, yay, I have all these riches now and I made it in this capitalist society, but hey, I'm still exploiting my people abroad and here. So, what's like, that's not cool. That's not taking in the ideals of, unity and, socialism and Pan-Africanism. It's not compatible. And so I definitely resonate with that. Like, why the hell would you make a Fred Hampton movie and have, these individuals there? Yeah, you're not tripping. I feel you.
I hear what you're saying, and I think that what comes to mind is how the pursuit of American upward mobility and capitalistic ventures is often confused with African liberation. And there are people who are at the top within the American, dynamic that truly have internalized that because they have made it and they are part of the 1%, they have therefore created a pathway for African liberation. And that's not true. And so that's what I'm hearing, like, in your question. So I don't think you're tripping. I think there's not a lot of deep analysis. Like, I don't know if Jay-Z rapping about Fred Hampton is because he's a strategic man who knows what is going to entice someone to buy his music, or if he's really that stupid. Like, I don't know which one it is. You get what I'm saying? I wouldn't put anything past the 1% because you have to have a certain level of strategy and ability to manipulate people to get there. You get what I'm saying? So in that context, like, where my mind goes is that man is very clever. I can see his motivation, what he's doing by making this song, but the way people are perceiving it is not really what liberation is. You get what I'm saying? That's what comes to mind for me.
And we got some comments on this question on YouTube. Comrade Ramirez said Fred would beat Jay-Z with the Black Panther Party newspaper. And he is not making that up. There's actually a speech where Fred Hampton says we are going to beat black capitalists to death with the Black Panther Party newspaper. So that is correct. That is correct, he would have. Also, Danny B on YouTube says, Cabral wrote extensively on the class question. I appreciated how the documentary called out that Cabral said no to colonialism and to neocolonialism. Absolutely. And actually, that brings up another thing I wanted to talk about. There's a part where Amilcar Cabral says the Portuguese are not our enemy. And obviously, the PAIGC, the armed struggle was against Portuguese colonialism, but Cabral says, clearly, Portuguese people are not our enemy. This system is. So, like, what does that mean to y'all?
Oh, that's great. I kind of, you know what it kind of reminds me of? It's like when Europeans are like really mad and butthurt that I might say I hate white people, but I'm not actually talking about you. I'm not actually talking about you. I'm talking about the system that we're in, this white supremacist, patriarchal, colonial system that we are in. I might, say a comment, but I like, if you actually know what I'm saying and know like what we're fighting for, you will understand it. It's not about you. It's about the system. So yeah, I resonate with that.
Yeah. I think it basically goes back to how, like, just how the systems of white supremacy and capitalism and all those different things, how it has hurt and harmed everyone. That includes white people, Black people, and all the other ethnic groups that are here in the American structure. That's what comes to mind when I heard that. And I also, it was very enlightening because it shows that just because you are forced to take up arms because of your enemy and the system, you can still engage with compassion and through a humanistic way. Because I think that it's very humanistic to say what they did in the film, basically, that it's not y'all, it's the system. And separating the person from the system, I think, is like part of step one of even deconstructing all the things that we learn about, like all the isms, basically. You get what I'm saying? I hope that made sense.
That made perfect sense to me, and I feel like that's what they were saying, that like they basically put a systemic or structural analysis over an individual analysis that would have said individual Portuguese people are the problem. No, individual Portuguese people have been enlisted into support of a system that's exploiting and oppressing all of us. And so understanding that, individual Portuguese people might take up weapons and try to fight and defend that system. We're going to have to deal with them. But overall, we are not going to stop this fight until we destroy that system that's making them fight for it. So yeah, I feel like it's the same thing here, right? That Europeans have been enlisted into supporting the system of capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy, but we could like take them all out tomorrow. We could just like, kill them off. But it wouldn't change the fact, like, we would still be oppressed. Capitalism would still keep going. Imperialism would still keep going if every European person popped out of existence. Similarly, patriarchy would still keep going if every cis man disappeared, because it is a system, it is a structure. And all of us have been indoctrinated into it. So yeah, I really appreciated that point. And I feel like it challenges some of the approaches that we're taught to take under capitalism. We're taught to make it an individual issue. We're taught to put it on like just regular ass people. So yeah, agree. What other thoughts did y'all have, or like final remarks or questions about the movie came up for y'all?
I'm really liking, or I really resonate with the point they made about like how the country was reinvented from the point of view of the oppressors. So if you want to reinvent a country, you have to tell it from the country's point of view, like, the people who live there. And so I definitely resonate with that. And especially being, an African displaced from Africa, it's difficult to be able to tell, a story with, knowing that I'm displaced. And so do y'all have any, like, I don't know, any like, feelings about, we are like physically displaced from Africa, but can we still reinvent, Africa, even though we're not physically there currently, but like we can still tell a story that's ours. It's our authentic story. instead of like our oppressors. Like, do you all have any kind of, you know, thoughts about that? It could be anything.
Did you have thoughts, teacher Blue?
I'm thinking right now. You can go if you have them.
Well, what came up for me is just that we are told that we're Americans, we're Black Americans, we have no connection to Africa. And our process of re-Africanization is understanding that we're not American. Like before we played the movie, we played that video of Kwame Ture talking about we're not African American, we're Africans in America, fighting capitalism, fighting imperialism. Everything that we have in this country, every right we had to like fight and bleed and die for, even like basic ass shit, like being able to go to the same stores as people, being able to sit on the same bus as people, being able to read. So like understanding our history here, you can see very clearly that we're not actually American, but we've been indoctrinated into the narrative of American nationalism. They've co-opted huge parts of our history to say that we're American, like putting Harriet Tubman on the money, calling her an American hero. When she was alive, she was considered contraband. She was considered a fugitive of the state. She was considered a terrorist. So like, I feel like our process of Africanization is like disconnecting from this empire that enslaved us and is exploiting us and oppressing us, and reconnecting with Africa. Like that's why we call ourselves African. That's why the focus of the APRP is like turning African people away from the American empire in this particular context.
I think I think I have conflicting feelings about, you know, just being a displaced African. Because America never felt like my home and Peru never felt like my home. And I wonder sometimes, is it possible? Because what I think about is how, even if I have accepted, I am African, you know, I am an African person. America's not my home, right? I believe that. But I often think about like how much I've been indoctrinized and how there are a lot of subconscious things that I engage in culturally that are never going to change because I was born on this land. You get what I'm saying? And so like, I think about it and I'm very conflicted, especially like just being immersed in the American culture. I feel that like AAPRP is one sector of a bigger world that I constantly engage in, that is constantly like training me and programming me, because it's everywhere, you know, on the Facebook, on the Instagram, on the Twitter, when you walk down the street, you get what I'm saying? And so that's where the conflict comes from. It's kind of like, okay, well, I accept it. I'm here doing the work. I want to contribute to my community. I want to contribute to the mission of AAPRP. But what are all the things that I don't know that are impacting me, that impact my behaviors and my interactions and all those different things? I think that's the most, where the most conflict comes from your question.
Thank you, Rose. Yeah, no, I definitely can feel that conflict, you know, within myself too, Jabril. Like, yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. And I think Onisono's point about, you know, understanding that let's look back. Sorry, my cat's in the background. We look back from, we turn our backs to these places we don't feel welcome in, and they're obviously not our home. And you know, reading text and speaking with people, communicating with people from Africa, you know, it's like really invigorating, and also like it's kind of scary too. It's like, oh wow, like I'm speaking with, you know, my people, like here they are and I'm learning from them. So yeah, I love it.
And then Monica says in the comments, we are always unlearning, unpacking, and decolonizing. It's a lifelong journey because we have been indoctrinated into it, just to Deidre Bill's point. And yeah, I agree. It's like I did not realize the extent to which I had internalized like US imperialist propaganda until I went to Cuba and then came back. And then I was like, woo, Like, I thought I was like anti-imperialist, and then I was like, no, I really wasn't. I really wasn't, because it's like constant messaging. It's constant like imperialist messaging, white supremacist messaging, patriarchal messaging, like from every possible source on like a constant basis, and you don't see it because you're constantly surrounded by it. And then you go somewhere else where that's not happening. Like in Cuba, there's no billboards with advertising. If you see a billboard, it says like be nice to each other, or like use correct pronouns, or like something like humanistic. There's no advertising. And like then you go back to the United States and you see advertising all around you, and it's like women's bodies and like swears and like, you know, anti-human things, and you're just like, wow, like this really actually is deeply rooted in me because I'm constantly exposed to it. Like Mac in the comments on YouTube is calling it Western programming, and that's exactly what it is. So I appreciate DJ Bell pointing that out. Any final thoughts that y'all have on the film or on this really great discussion we've been having? Let's start to wrap this up.
I think my main takeaway from the film is realizing different tactics that can be used in the struggle, you know, because just being a part of an organization, I think is one step, but also like understanding what is my role in all of this, like how, like who am I in the larger movement, in the larger struggle for Africans, you feel me? And so like the film, what I really appreciate is that it offered new language for me, new tactics, and a new way of thinking. Like I didn't know that you could, be in war in a compassionate way. I didn't know that. I didn't know you could do that. Oh, now you can. Okay, let me find out who I gotta mess up in a compassionate way now, right? Like, so I really appreciated that.
What about you, Kendra?
I'm sorry, my cat wants to get here. Woo. All right, this is Spike Lee. No, I really feel that. I'm very glad that I was able to learn about Amilcar Cabral through this documentary. Because like I said, I just was not aware of this person, and it makes me want to study more about his contributions. And I kind of really, I really dig the term re-Africanization. It's like when they said, they define it like, you wake up and realize that you need to emancipate. I know the term woke, and how we use like, oh, be woke and stay woke. It's like maybe like be woke is like the baby step towards re-Africanization. Like how people think of, being woke. It's like, okay, that's a little baby step, but take it a step further, that's re-Africanization. And like, I'm really glad to like, in my own journey, coming into my own re-Africanization with you all. So yeah, I think that I'll take that term and think about it as I continue to do work.
For sure, same. Like that's the number one takeaway for me. It's just that it's possible to go back. Like this place teaches us we're not African anymore. We'll never be African again. But what re-Africanization shows, like what, the struggle of Africans in Guinea-Bissau show, every anti-colonial struggle of African people shows, is that we can. They can come and impose their way of the world on us, and we can fight to reclaim our own and our own history and our own culture. So yeah, definitely going to take the term re-Africanization and that new understanding forward with me, and I deeply appreciate this movie for showing the truly Pan-African connections that Amilcar Cabral and the PAIGC work to build. So, and then Monica says, paradigm shift is what being woke means. Go beyond with political education. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Thank you, DJ Bril and Kendra, for your really great contributions in this conversation. We're trying out a new format, and I think it was very successful. So yeah, thanks y'all so much. We do this film series every second Saturday of every single month. We've been doing it for 2 straight years, and we are not going to stop. I'm trying to stall while I look up March's movie. I just found it. Okay, so in March, actually, so the next Pan-African film series will be March 13th. That is a Saturday. It'll be at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, and we are showing one of my favorite movies. We are showing the film Fast Color, which is about 3 generations of African women with superpowers. Also, Kendra's birthday. So happy birthday. But yeah, folks, join us on March 13th at 2 p.m. for a screening and discussion of Fast Color, some awesome African and woman-centered sci-fi. Also, join us for weekly Pan-African news every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. You can watch it on the same platforms that you watch this every Thursday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your attention and participations. Hope you have a great rest of your Saturday. And